that we're working to implement, and we established the Civilian Review and Accountability Board. Again, Metro Council and I worked together in an effort led by Deputy Mayor Ellen Hessen and Councilwoman Paula McCraney to create this board. I want to thank them again and all the people across our community who provided input, time, energy, and effort to establish the board and our newly created Office of Inspector General. Councilman Bill Hollander is here today. He was essential in that process, as were Councilwoman Green and President James up on the dais that you'll be hearing from in a second. The goal of these new entities is to provide civilian oversight and increase transparency and accountability in police disciplinary matters. And that chain of civilian oversight with law enforcement or armed forces is essential to the democracy in the United States and in our city. It is clear that too often, many of our residents feel that there is not enough accountability. Too many civilians fear that their concerns, they feel that their concerns and complaints are unheard, uninvestigated, and sadly, unimportant. That feeling of being shut out of a process designed to serve you is part of what leads to the kind of demonstrations that we saw in our city and throughout our country this past year. We created the Civilian Review Board to ensure that people are heard and that people are represented. Each member of the Civilian Review Board is taking on this responsibility with the understanding that police perform an essential, demanding, and dangerous job. We ask police to understand, or we ask our community to understand that we often ask our police officers to deal with the results of society's systemic failures, all of them. And that's not fair to our officers or to our community. At the same time, it is fair for the people of Louisville to expect accountability and transparency, to know that they can trust the systems meant to serve and to protect them. And for our new board, the Civilian Review Board, to earn that trust, it must include a cross-section of people from throughout our city, people with varying experiences and points of view, including those who may have been critical of police actions in the past. And this is one of the reasons why I nominated very intentionally 2 people that were seen by the community as active and legitimate within the protest community. Those voices have to be on this Civilian Review Board. These people were voted for and put on the Civilian Review Board for their very valuable perspectives and for the community to then see that this is a legitimate body that includes all the different viewpoints of our city. And that's because when this board reviews a case and renders its assessment and recommendations, it is essential that people throughout our community, wherever they are on the political spectrum, wherever they live, whatever their background, it's important that people see and hear people that look like them and that think like them. It's hard to get that with 11 people, but that type of inclusivity has to be there in order to build the respect and the integrity for this board's process and judgment. Now, I'm confident. We spent lots and lots of time on this. I want to thank Althea Jackson over here, who is our director of our boards and commissions. She and I spent more time on this board than any board we've ever spent time on in years and years because of the criticality of this board and what it means for our city. I'm confident that the 11 women and men that I nominated and the Metro Council approved will review each case thoroughly and fairly and provide the perspectives we need to help guide our efforts to create greater transparency and accountability. That's good for everybody, police officers, civilians. Now, those who suggest otherwise, I just submit are just plain wrong. And in some cases, people are now working to sow division in this process. It appears that these folks want to create the good old days. You know what? The good old days never existed for everybody. It's a fiction. Today's winners are going to embrace a new future. This future that we're forming ourselves here in our community, and they are going to embrace the full opinions that are critical to creating a safe city that is full of opportunity for everybody. That should be plain to everybody by the pain that was seen on the streets of Louisville and in our country last year. So we cannot let people sow division. We cannot let people create innuendo, accusations against anybody on our civilian review board without any sound footing at all, because everybody has to have a stake in public safety. And as I said, we're at a crossroads with public safety, and we must move forward together. I'm optimistic about where we're at as a city. I see good work taking place throughout Louisville, and this is when people that feel like they're losing something lash out and reach out. No, we've got to say we're going to keep moving forward to a better future for everybody here in our city. And that means we need everybody working together, everybody, including those who've criticized the system of law enforcement and are now volunteering to join that system and make it work better. That's what citizenship is all about. It's easier to sit on the couch and be a critic. We got plenty of those. But it's much harder for people to step up and say, I'm going to be in the game. I'm going to get in the arena. And that's why I really appreciate the people that stepped up to be on this civilian review board. That's what being a patriotic American is all about. So the people on the review board are doing their duty. I thank them. And I thank our police officers for their service to our city as well. We all want the same thing, a safer city. So let's continue working together to create that safer city for everybody here in Louisville. I'm very pleased to be joined on the podium by Council President James and Councilwoman Green. President James is now going to share a few remarks.
Thank you, Mayor Fischer. And thanks for being here to Councilwoman Green and Councilman Hollander. I would follow up with some things that Mayor Fischer touched upon. The Civilian Review Board, there is not a major city in our country that does not have a Civilian Review Board. And our city are one of the last large cities in the country to get one. So change isn't always easy, but it's good. And so since the point in time that we appointed the members to the Civilian Review Board, there have been many people that have had questions and comments about some of the people that were appointed to the Civilian Review Board by the Metro Council. And that's okay. You can have thoughts and comments, but we voted, and those people are now assigned to the Civilian Review Board, and we move forward from here. But this morning, there was a post made by the spokesperson for the FOP that quite simply is very divisive at best. And you may not agree with what people say, and you may not understand what the two people that are being spoken of have said in the past. But as I have said to many people before, I didn't join the police department because I really wanted to be a police officer bad. I joined the police department to try and change the police department from what it was. I ran to be the president of the FOP some 20 years ago because I wanted to change the FOP from what it was. And so here we are in the year 2021, and we are still dealing with issues that I feel like should have been dealt with a long time ago. The people assigned to the Civilian Review Board that the council voted on don't all sing from the same hymnal, and they all have different points of view based upon their life's experiences. In particular, I'm talking about Anthony Taylor and Reverend Bussey. They are speaking their life experiences. And just because we all didn't share that life experience that they have experienced, and just because we don't agree with what they may or may not say, those voices need to be heard. We've watched outside these windows as people from all over our community have demanded that. They've shouted it and begged for it. And so having the diverse voices from all over our city is very important. Establishing credibility and legitimacy of our police department is extremely important. And having a civilian review board that has all those voices mixed together is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. And I know that there are those out there that don't feel that it is so, but it is so. It is the way that it is. Democracy is which our country is based upon, is not always pretty. It's ugly, quite frankly, but it's what makes our country great. And it's what makes our city great. And so our city is going to keep moving forward, and it's going to keep being a great place to live. And we're going to make it better for our children and our grandchildren as we move forward. But being divisive and trying to tear apart our city is not how we're going to get there. Thank you.
Councilwoman Jessica Green runs our Public Safety Committee for the council and is going to share her thoughts.
Good afternoon, everybody. I woke up this morning and began my daily scroll of social media as I do on every day. And I saw that FOP post and I ended up with a pit in the bottom of my stomach. I'm proud to be a Louisvillian, but today I'm embarrassed by those comments of the FOP. I don't know who runs the Facebook page for the FOP, but I'm calling on the FOP to relieve that individual of their service and of their duties in that regard. That post still remains up when I walked into this room. And so either those comments represent the isolated, ridiculous views of one misguided person, or we are saying they represent the culture of the entire FOP. Either way we slice it or dice it, it's sad. But if those comments, which I do not believe that they do, if they do not represent the feelings of the FOP as an organization, they need to be removed immediately. Those comments represent the worst example of community and police relations that I've seen in a long time. And they represent the best example of why people are so angry and why they continue to protest in the streets and talk about unequal treatment and unfair treatment by police officers. Louisville was ground zero for the 21st century civil rights era in 2020, and we remained that for 2021. In the 1950s and the 1960s, law enforcement released dogs, German Shepherds, onto Black people as we began to find our voice during what the new civil rights era was. Today, our own law enforcement makes veiled threats to Black people who dare to have a voice. I'm disgusted by those comments and the idea that someone cannot understand the difference between exercising freedom of speech and maybe saying statements about their feelings about law enforcement and comparing those individuals to cop murders. If you don't understand that, you're ridiculous. And not only were those comments divisive, they were intentional. There was an intentional response that the writer of those comments was attempting to elicit in a certain subsect of our community. The reaction that they wanted to elicit, some have gotten. I've looked at some of the shared comments. I've looked at comments to say, act now. What does that exactly mean? Are you telling individuals to rid the community of these individuals? Shame on you. It's sickening. I've seen a lot of things in my day, but this is actually the worst of the worst that I have seen. The individuals on this board are private citizens. Private citizens. And the FOP has put their lives at risk. 2 individuals received threats after a Metro Council meeting, which was reprehensible. The veiled threats of calling these individuals cop killers sickens me to my guts. And again, it was intentional. You want a response? You want to bully these individuals? Shame on you. Now, again, we expect more out of the individuals who have dedicated their lives to service. But what I can tell you right now, I stand here as a Black woman with very strong views myself. Today, I do not feel confident that the members of the FOP would defend me, myself, my property, and my family based on some of the comments that I've made. I certainly don't feel confident that you would do that for some of the individuals that have protested in our streets. You are civil servants. You are not thugs. This is not a gang. Act better, do better. And if you cannot do better, this job, this post is not for you. The city of Louisville no longer needs your service. Thank you.
All right. We're happy to take any questions.
Have any of you spoken directly to anyone with the FOP? Has anyone taken credit for making that post? And if so, did you ask them to step down from their position?
I know that Chief Shields is having some conversations sometime this afternoon, but from our office, we have not yet.
I've had a conversation today with the president of the FOP expressing the displeasure with the post and tried to get some understanding of why the post was made. And we obviously agreed to disagree on that.
Mayor, I want to get your reaction when you read the post, and obviously in its totality, comparing two individuals who have been present in the social justice movement here in Louisville to someone who shot and killed a cop back in the 1980s in New York City. I want to get your reaction when you first heard of it or read it.
It sickened me. It made me sad. I think some people think like this is some kind of game, you know, with social media is an ugly place. I don't get up in the morning and read social media because I want to start my day in a positive way. And so when you see someone that is an authority like that misuse their platform to create this, what they think is a clever innuendo, but it's very clear in what it's saying, it makes me feel sick. It makes me disappointed. It makes me want to say, you know, that person needs to go. They are not worthy of that recognition, of that post that they have. And it makes me hope that the people that are around that person say, we need to expel those type of thoughts from our organization. The FOP also, people need to understand, people don't really know what the FOP is. They think it represents all of the police officers. I can tell you most police officers that I know, David can tell us more, President James, 70%, they don't associate with the FOP. They are dues-paying members, but they don't follow some of this ideology that's coming out of it that's most extreme, like we see here also. So good police officers need to also say, that does not represent us. What we want is a new community way of policing that involves our citizens to co-produce public safety, to give us the legitimacy in policing that we so crave and that we so need. That's what will make their jobs easier. And that's why we're talking up here today. This is a moment of importance for we as leaders to speak out and condemn this type of activity and implore those that have been sitting on the sidelines to say, this is just too much. Come on, folks. You cannot be silent when bad things like this are said or take place.
I have a question for Councilwoman Green. I know last year there was some history there with a comment you made that the FOP said was endorsing harm to police officers. You know, given that history and what the FOP is saying now, do you fear that it could harm the credibility of the Civilian Review Board?
No, I don't feel that it harms the credibility of Civilian Review Board. What I do feel is that it harms the credibility of the FOP and of our police department. And so this fear-mongering, this cyberbullying that is going on, it seems, as I said, more like the thing that a group of thugs or gangsters would do more than what our law enforcement should do. So again, I cannot say enough how embarrassed I am that the union that represents our law enforcement has allowed that to be up and allows it to continue to be up. You know, they are intentionally trying to affect the credibility of the review board to a certain base. But in my mind, all that does is bolster the credibility and the need to have the civilian review board for the people who need it the most. The people who live in the neighborhoods that I live in, the people that have brown and black skin, the fact that we have a police union that would bully private citizens, that would bully an elected official for speaking about my own life experiences. You know, I dealt with threats this time last year towards my own family. But you know, at least I can take it on the chin. I'm an elected official. But I don't know if they think exactly about what they're doing. Well, actually, I think they do. They know exactly what they're doing. And so anytime you paint somebody as anti-cop, particularly as you try to associate them with being a cop killer, you know, that's going to bring out a certain element, a certain level of vigilantes. And as I said, the fact that we have a union that would endorse the idea or support the idea of harm towards private citizens, I'm embarrassed for Louisville today, very embarrassed.
Just want to add a comment to that this action enhances the reputation and the importance of the Civilian Review Board. When you have extreme statements like that made, well-minded, good-thinking people say, wow, that's the type of extreme ideology we need to push to the side. And my question is, what are these extremists afraid of? There's 2 people on an 11-member board. What are they afraid of? They should welcome diverse points of view. So I think it enhances the importance of the Civilian Review Board and the good work that the council and our citizens have done to put this together.
Have any of you heard from the 2 individuals on the Civilian Review Board that this post was, one would assume, made against? Or have you talked to them today and gotten their thoughts? I imagine, not trying to put words in their mouth, but something like this wouldn't deter them from doing what they were nominated to do.
I've been in regular contact with Antonio Taylor and Reverend Bussey throughout this whole process, making sure that they were getting the kind of support that they felt that they were needed. Look, lesser citizens would have backed away from this and just said, this has gotten a little too intense. It's not what they signed up for. But they understand that somehow their names were called at this point in the history of our city. And they said, no, we're going to continue on through with this, whether they were nominated or not. Whether they won the election or not with the Metro Council. That takes a lot of guts for somebody to do that. So we have heard from one of the individuals today, just FYI. I want to make sure that you all knew about this, but it does not deter them and what they stand for as a citizen to help make this Civilian Review Board process. And they should be thanked and celebrated by our city for that.
So I understand this is about the FOP's posts overnight, but there were a lot of concerns from Metro Council members, members of the public about the posts that were made themselves. And even if the people who have those viewpoints may not agree with the FOP's statement, what would your response be to someone who looked at those posts and had concerns about the objectivity or a level of bias against police officers on the review board?
Well, I think there's a big difference between 2 people that were just normal citizens doing their thing, involved in the protest movement, expressing their passions for the activities that took place, versus the implied or even direct threat that came from an authority figure representing the FOP. Those are 2 very different dynamics. And what's at play here in our country and our city is a power dynamic. Who has power and who doesn't have power? And what we saw last summer was people who have not traditionally have had power have said, enough. This is not right. And that's what all of these reforms that my office, the Metro Council, has been co-producing together have been about, to recognize we are in a new day in America, in our city. We want to be that model city that is leaning into racial equity and showing the country it can be done in a new way. And when you embark on that type of change effort, as President James talked about, you're going to have some people that are going to try to disrupt change because they see this change as some type of threat to them. And I would just invite those folks to not see this as a threat, But in particular, if you're in law enforcement, you see this as an opportunity to take a job that last summer sure wasn't any fun, being on the front lines of the protest while they were going on. That's not why they signed up to be police officers. The work that we're talking about up here on the stage and what the Civilian Review Board is intended to do is to make us a safer city, to involve those voices that haven't been heard before. So that's a good thing for police officers, and very different dynamics that took place on social media.
This is more of a procedural question. The board is so new, and I think it hasn't met yet, and there's a lack of understanding about what it will do from some in the community. Can you explain what 2 members, or however many you want to use, can do? What kind of unilateral power do they have on the board? Can they fire an officer? Can they take discipline against an officer? Could you just give us more context?
Well, and that's the thing. Thank you for asking that question, because that's the thing I find so ironic about all of this. These are 2 people out of an 11-person board. So what, they've got combined 18% of the power of the board. There's no unilateral action that anybody can take on the board. The board members are prescribed by ordinance on where they come from, so it represents the balance of our community as well. So these are just 2 equal voices out of 11. The next step for the board will be to have an organizing meeting. Does anybody know what the date of April 15th? So they can organize themselves as a board. The first important responsibility will be to hire the inspector general. They will need to nominate and elect a chair. So they'll be getting together on their business. But that's the whole thing. Why should you be afraid of 2 people out of 11? Welcome their diversity. Okay? Thank you all for coming today.